I've always enjoyed the silence of the road. Working as a truck driver gave me a sense of freedom, a kind of peace that only those who live behind the wheel truly understand. But that night, something felt different. The darkness seemed heavier, and the fog creeping along the road swallowed the glow of my headlights. I was on my way to a small town, hauling a load of farm goods. It was past 2 in the morning when I saw a lone figure waving on the shoulder. A thin man, wearing an old coat and carrying a backpack. Against all my rules, I decided to stop. He looked desperate. As soon as he got in, he thanked me with a strange smile, almost nervous. I didn't ask many questions, just the basics. Where was he headed? He said he needed to get to a nearby village, but didn't go into detail. For the first few minutes, silence hung between us. Only the hum of the engine and the sound of tires on wet asphalt filled the air. But soon I realized he was watching me. Not directly, but from the corner of his eye. He pretended to look ahead, but I knew he was analyzing me. My stomach started to churn. I decided to break the ice. I asked if he traveled around those parts often. He gave a vague reply, saying he was always on the move. His voice was deep, almost monotonous, and every word seemed to come out with effort. That's when I noticed his hands. They were filthy, as if he had been digging in the dirt with his bare fingers. When I asked if he was okay, he just smiled again, but this time the smile felt off, lifeless, like a mask. A chill ran down my spine. The journey continued, but the tension inside the cab was palpable. With every mile, I felt something was seriously wrong. When we reached a sharp curve, he asked me to stop. He said he wanted to get off right there. It didn't make sense. There was nothing around but trees and fog. I refused, saying it was too dangerous, but he insisted, his tone now more firm. Reluctantly, I pulled over to the shoulder. Before stepping out, he looked me in the eye and said, "Thanks for the ride, but you should have kept driving." Without another word, he vanished into the darkness. As soon as he disappeared from sight, something hit me. It was a strong smell, like wet earth mixed with something rotten. It didn't take long for me to notice he'd left his backpack on the seat. I thought about going after him, but something held me back. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the backpack. Inside, there were dirty clothes and something wrapped in an old cloth. When I unwrapped it, I nearly dropped everything. It was a bundle of bones, small, like those of a child. My heart raced. The clothes had dark, dried stains. It was blood. I couldn't sleep that night. I took the backpack to the police as soon as I reached town. When I described the man, the officers exchanged serious looks. One of them pulled me aside and explained that years ago, a truck driver had disappeared on that same road after picking up someone matching that man's description. They never found his body, only his abandoned truck. Since then, similar stories have surfaced occasionally, always involving the same stranger. I knew my life would never be the same. That man wasn't just a drifter, he was a warning that some rides are better left unoffered. I was never a fan of traveling at night, but that was an emergency. I had just visited my sick grandmother in a small town, and I was heading back home. It was almost 2 a.m., and the road was deserted, surrounded by a darkness that seemed to swallow everything around. My car, my faithful companion for years, decided to break down right there, in the middle of nowhere. No signal on my phone, and miles of forest surrounding me. So I started walking, hoping a car would pass by. That's when I heard the muffled sound of an engine approaching. I looked back and saw an old bus, worn down, coming slowly towards me. The bus stopped right beside me and the doors creaked open. The driver, a man with an expressionless face, stared at me without saying a word. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. With no other choice, I got on the bus. The interior was even stranger. There were only a few passengers, all sitting in silence, staring straight ahead, as if they were hypnotized. A shiver ran down my spine, but I tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion. I took a seat in the back, away from the others. The bus resumed its journey, gliding down the road with an almost supernatural smoothness. I tried to make small talk with a woman sitting nearby, but she didn't move a muscle. With every passing minute, the silence became more suffocating, and I started noticing something odd. The road we were traveling on didn't look familiar. I looked out the window, but all I could see was a dense fog, hiding any signs of civilization. I asked the driver where we were headed, but he just smiled. The sense of danger grew with every mile. I decided I had to get off that bus, but when I tried to stand up, I realized my legs wouldn't obey. It was as if something was holding me to the seat, an invisible force draining my energy. The other passengers started to move, but in a mechanical way, slowly turning their heads towards me. Their eyes, empty and expressionless, glowed in the bus's darkness. My heart was racing, and I felt panic taking over. Then the bus suddenly stopped. The doors opened and a hooded figure entered. It walked slowly down the aisle, its footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. When it reached my side, it leaned over and whispered something in a language I didn't understand. The air around me felt heavier, and the last thing I remember is its red eyes, like burning embers, staring at me before everything went dark. I woke up on the side of the road, exactly where my car had broken down. The sky was starting to lighten, and I was alone, as if nothing had happened. But something was different. In the rearview mirror of my car, a small mark, like a fingerprint on fire, seemed to be watching me. Since that day, I avoid deserted roads and never get on a bus I don't know. Something tells me that next time I won't wake up. I never imagined that a simple road trip could turn into such a real nightmare. My friends, Jack and Emily, and I rented a motorhome to explore the road. It was supposed to be an unforgettable adventure, and it ended up being, but not in the way we expected. It all started on the third night. We were at a gas station, filling up, when a man approached us. He seemed harmless, just a traveler asking for a ride. Emily, always generous, insisted we should help him. It was the worst mistake of our lives. He introduced himself as Mike. He didn't talk much, but his gaze was unsettling. Something didn't feel right. I got chills when he climbed into the motorhome, but I didn't say anything. I thought I was overreacting. For the first few hours he kept quiet, sitting at the back, but I noticed he was watching our every move. Jack tried to strike up a conversation, but Mike either avoided it or answered with short phrases, as if he was more interested in studying us than talking. The tension in the air became unbearable when we stopped to sleep at a remote campsite. I volunteered to take the first watch while the others slept. That's when Mike approached me, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He started talking about strange things, about how the road could change people, and how some travelers never made it home. I felt a lump in my throat, but I pretended everything was fine. At that moment I realized he knew something we didn't. When morning came, Jack was missing. We searched everywhere, but all we found was his blood-stained cap near the woods. That's when Emily started to panic. Mike, however, was oddly calm. He suggested that Jack must have gotten lost and that we should continue our journey. Emily, in desperation, confronted Mike, but before she could say anything more, he attacked her. It was so fast that I could barely react. Mike stabbed her, and she fell lifeless on the floor of the motorhome. I knew it was my only chance to escape. Without thinking twice, I jumped out of the moving door. The fall hurt, but I kept running without looking back. Mike didn't follow me, but I could still feel his eyes on me. I made it to a small town, where I collapsed in a cafe and told the police everything. When they went back to the motorhome, Mike and the bodies of my friends had vanished. All that was left was the empty motorhome, parked as if nothing had happened. To this day, no one knows who Mike was or why he did what he did. The motorhome was found months later, abandoned in another town, with the key still in the ignition. Sometimes I wonder if Mike is still out there on the road, waiting for his next ride. All I know is that I'll never trust strangers again, and every time I see a motorhome, I feel the same chill from that night.